So Nathan stroke Maya, are you there? Would you like to just say a few words about Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. I am here, and I am Maya because of homeschooling. But
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, we went on a bunch of us youngsters. We were youngsters back then. Went on a trip to Ethiopia with Phil and Av in 2004 kind of time. And the thing I remember is, well, a couple of things. I remember going incredibly fast on a cart pulled by a horse with him, which was like I never thought I'd ever be in that situation. But the second is in the evenings we would just sit around and just chat, and kind of you just begin to chat to different people. And he began to kind of tell stories about their mission trips away and Bangladesh and all of that kind of stuff. And they just constantly amazed me. Um, Riots and wars and blackouts, and sometimes you meet people somewhere, like you would meet them in a small church in the south of England, and then you begin to find out a bit more about someone, and you realize, wow, you have lived an incredible life that is inspiring to me as a 14-year-old then, hearing the stories and thinking, wow, I could do this. And they would kind of he would just encourage you. Yeah, go on. Why don't you do that, Nate? Why don't you go and why don't you try that? Why don't you? Um, and so it's just those little moments of hearing the stories and just getting those little kind of little encouragements from them. Just every time, how you doing, Nate? You're doing well. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think you can't underestimate how much of an impact that has on you. So, yeah.
Thank you, Nate. That's brilliant. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why Phil was a pillar of this church, because he knew the kids by name. As our kids were growing up, he knew their names and supported them and loved them, which was fantastic. Bri, are you there? Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, sure. So we were sort of reminiscing, and the times that really stood out to us was going to Phil and Av's house for marriage prep before we got married. And I know there was like a year where quite a bunch of us all got married within a few months, and Phil and Av dutifully had all of us through the house for curries and chats and stories and stuff, and really invested in us, and we loved going, didn't we? We had such a great time. And Phil would always like have good words of wisdom, and like Nate says, some brilliant stories. But like, as much as any of that, we just loved seeing Phil and Av like model it together. And they're very pregnant hormonal person.
Yeah.
But the rhythm of it and switching languages and just how they kind of preferred each other, and setting the timer for like how long they would go and leave us so we could chat for a little while was definitely Phil's job. And he'd make sure that there wasn't too much, like we didn't get chatting with Avril for too long, and that there would be time for us to do the questions and the exercises and stuff. And he kept it all going perfectly like that.
Yeah.
But Chris's favourite bit was always in the car on the way over. He'd be like, do you think Phil's going to make Bombay potatoes tonight? And that's what we were going for. He'd love that, as well as the stories and the wise words and just the benefit of their experience and watching them together.
Yeah.
And we really valued that. And I know Mike and Liv wanted to pass on their love and their condolences as well, because that meant a lot to them too. And there's lots of us that we just really value that investment in our marriage just as we were starting out. And yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. What Phil and Av did was brought people into their homes and brought them into their lives and lived in a transparent way, which has sown into these marriages that we see flourishing today, which is amazing, isn't it? Thanks, Bri. That was lovely. So another side of Mr. Phil Gain was really helping with Litchip Matravers, the village, wasn't it? When the church first began 25 years ago, we were very much based in Litchip Matravers, and Phil and Av joined Phil and I in praying incredibly fervently and regularly for the village, and to see people come to know the Lord in the village, which indeed we did. And then later on, getting involved with Churches Together, the Christian community in the village. So I'm going to pass on now to Adrian and Rosemary, if you would like to take a minute or two to reflect on Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I think I just want to say, first of all, that Phil was just such a lovely man. He was so gentle, and he was so full of wisdom and experience that really, as Nathan's hinted, he carried it so quietly. You didn't realize all this stuff. And he was just full of wisdom, and he was full of encouragement. Somehow you always got the feeling with Phil that whatever madcap idea you came up with that might not be at all to his taste, he'd back you in it. And yeah. And it just seems to me that if ever a man deserved the title of Pillar of the Church, Phil Game was that man. Pillars don't run around doing wild things and draw attention to themselves. They take the weight. And I always felt that Phil did there. He was there for the important things, the things that kept the place running. And the other thing pillars do is they hold up the roof. They make space for others to do the madder things, perhaps. And it did always impress me. I mean, I can't say that, possibly because we don't live anywhere near them and generational things, whatever, our own preoccupations, I couldn't say we were ever particularly close friends of Phil and Avril, but we have known them so long. And it always amazed me in a way that the fact that Phil and Avril have lived in Parkstone all the time I've known them, didn't make any difference. They saw that the Lighthouse was a Litchip Matravers church, and they got stuck into Litchip Matravers. They were just committed to us, and Phil got involved with the Churches Together committee, and he helped with that and was in fact the secretary for quite a while. And he had great respect for other traditions and other people's ways of doing things, and he allowed people to do their thing, and he would support and back what you were doing. I passed on the news to the various people in the village, and Stephen Partridge, of the vicar of the parish church, he wrote straight back, and he said Phil was a rooted man of Christ, and I thought that was a really good depiction. He was just rooted in Christ. He was completely solid in his love of the Lord and his place in God. And he said he was a strong force for good within the church family in Litchip and beyond. And I think that's so true. I found Phil a great support personally. As I say, whatever you proposed, he'd be there. And as many of you know, I've done crazy things like run art exhibitions in the village as part of Churches Together. And I never got the impression that Phil was particularly artistic in himself, but he was there. He was doing the administration, the bits and pieces that needed doing. He was always there supporting. And I think I just admired him so much because, to be honest, I'm not that good at administration, and Phil was brilliant at just doing the stuff that needed doing without any fuss at all. And really quite humbling to see him at work and just, okay, it just needs doing, just do it. Don't worry about it. Lovely man. So lovely. And we're so grateful.
We are. And Phil and Av have been a tremendous support to us. And lovely man.
We probably ought to mention, I'm not a great traveller. I don't like going abroad, to be honest. I don't like it when I go somewhere where they don't speak English and they don't drive on the left. But we had arranged a holiday to go to Norway. We went on the Hurtigruten, which was only going on the ship anyway. Wasn't even really much to Norway. And I just began to get really sort of nervous about it. So we went to Phil and Avril, because they do this amazing thing. They go all over the place. And we asked them to pray for us before we went, just because I'd got the jitters about going abroad.
Yeah.
It was lovely. They were so good to us.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Adrian and Rosemary. Really good. And yeah, some of you won't realise, but in the earlier years of the Lighthouse, Phil spent a lot of time really doing the administration that supported the life and growth of the church, but a great eye for detail, and, probably got Phil and I out of all sorts of scrapes by reminding us of things and, oh, that's not how you spell that name, spell it this way, and, saved our face in all sorts of ways. So yeah, thanks. Let's move on to Mike and Joe, who've known Phil for a very long time also.
Yeah, we met Phil and Avril in 1996, just as the church was starting.
Yeah.
The Lighthouse Church was starting. We met him down in Bernard's Acre.
Yeah.
And I just want to emphasize how fantastically personable he was. You could really easily talk to him and he'd listen. He was just a great conversationalist.
Yeah.
And my dad and mum used to come to visit the Lighthouse on occasions, and they always said that Phil was the person who sought them out to talk to them and used to sit with them. And Millie, my daughter, she texted me yesterday to say that he was the person she sought out in the church to talk to. He just had a great facility at talking to people.
Yeah.
And like I said, he listened.
Yeah.
And he had a great sense of humor. I remember, for instance, we used to talk about football and we used to talk about Brentford for some bizarre reason. And we talked about the rugby. And if England ever beat Wales at the rugby, which was obviously very rare, but when England beat Wales at the rugby, he'd come up to me and he'd pretend he didn't know the score, wanting me to announce the score to him. And I knew he knew. He just used to have a funny sense of humor. And he's just a great bloke. And just easy to be with.
Yeah.
And someone I really looked up to.
Yeah.
Just, I'm going to miss him. Superb bloke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, so sorry that he's not with us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I thought for me, the minute when I first met him at Phil's house, he was like a big brother.
Yeah.
Just always has been the go-to person. He never passed judgment. He never made you feel like you didn't belong. It's just, Avril and Phil saw me through my worst early years, and they just put me back together. I just feel such a loss, but they were there every time. If I had to call somebody, it would be Avril and Phil.
Yeah.
And he always answered the phone. He always made me feel I was really welcome. And yeah, I'm just going to miss him so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. We can feel the love. We can feel the love. Thank you so much. Just taking a breath in between this and coming to Debs and Tim. One of the things we wanted to do this evening is to reflect on, what is it about a person that makes them a pillar of the church, that, makes such a valuable contribution. And you might think that I'm being super practical and perhaps a little bit unemotional here, but I'll tell you the very first thing that came to my mind, which was that with Phil, his yes was yes and his no was no. And if he said he would do something, you wouldn't get a text a few hours before bailing out, you know, because he was a bit tired or something. You could rely on him. And that's something that I really, really value about Phil Game. You know, it's such an important thing, that yes being yes and your no being no. And so you'd know where you were with him, and that was a great quality. So Tim and Debs, couple of minutes for you, my loves.
Okay, so Tim has nominated me to speak on our behalf. We had a chat this afternoon, and like Bri and Joe, it's a bit emotional. So I've written it down, so you have to excuse me, but I'm going to read it because that's the best way of getting through it. So we've known Phil and Ab for almost 30 years. And like Karen said, they are our spiritual mum and dad. Phil was a general of the faith. You know, he was one of those guys that he was just a leader, and it just came naturally to him. And like you said, Heather, he was a man of detail. And as Tim noted, he loved cooked breakfasts. But with Phil and Av, they were two parts of a whole. You couldn't tell where Phil ended and Av started, or the other way round. They were one, and it was always Phil and Av. So the story we want to share is that we, like I say, we've known Phil and Av for almost 30 years, and we were having problems in our old church, and the leadership of the church arranged for us to be counselled. And the guy said, "Oh, I've got somebody called Phil and Angela Game." And we went, "You don't mean Avril Game, do you?" And he said, "Yes." So Tim was going around the car park going, "Yes, yes." So that helped because we knew we were in safe hands, and they'd already moved to the lighthouse by then. The leaders obviously didn't know we'd already had a relationship with Phil and Ab, and we were so thankful it was them. Over the year that we saw them regularly, and I think we were thinking it was probably once a fortnight, they gently loved us and encouraged us to a place where God revealed to us what was happening spiritually, and enabled us to leave that church gracefully. They never once told us. They always gave us the space to seek God and for him to tell us. Since then, Phil and Av have been our encouragers, our sounding boards, our counsellors, our friends and our family. If it weren't for them in our lives, we would probably not be in church today, and we probably wouldn't even be married. Phil had a way of listening intently, speaking quietly and sparingly, but always bringing heaven's perspective.
Yeah.
He never told us what we should do or think, but his encouragement has always brought us to the place where we hear God's perspective and plans for us to take. When I told Ben the sad news, he said he had lost a spiritual granddad. Since we joined the Lighthouse 14 years ago, we have remained accountable to them. And Phil has blessed us with scrummy dinners once a month. As we shared life, ups and downs, health and sickness, disappointments and dreams. And we always leave them feeling encouraged and filled to overflowing.
Yeah.
And we're going to miss him.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Debs. That was beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for those different perspectives. Phil has written on our hearts something of kingdom. Every one of us who has, done this journey together in church with him, you'll all have seen something different in his life, received something different, and he's written something on our hearts. And I just wanted to take a moment for us to really be thankful for that aspect of the kingdom of God, or that aspect of Jesus that we've seen in him. Phil's going to say a few words in a moment, and all I'd like to say in handing over to Phil is that Phil and Avril were the people that we reached out to and asked for help when, 25 to 35 years ago, God started to speak to us about there being a new church at Litchett Matravers. And as young 30-somethings, we didn't really know what to do with something like that. We didn't know how to handle that call, or hardly know where to begin. And so what we did was we thought, who do we know? This is back in those days. Who do we know who A, really loves God, B, whose family, reflects Christian morals, and who we could actually imitate, whose lives we could emulate? Who could we invite to speak into our lives and guide us and pray for us as we try to work out what God's calling us to do? And Phil and I both landed on Phil and Avril, and we approached them and said, would you pray for us? We think God's speaking to us to do something unusual, and we don't really know how to go about it. And they came alongside us and stood next to us. I likened us to like little whippy saplings that could easily have got tossed to and fro in the winds, but they came alongside us and were like a strong stake holding us, in the soil of the faith, so that we could grow and increase. And I will always be eternally grateful to the Lord for that steadiness that Phil Game added to us. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you. Yeah, this whole thing has come as a shock to all of us, hasn't it, really? Because it was so sudden. And I think every single person here, and we would love to have absolutely everyone say a few words and tell a story, but I think there's over 100 people on this Zoom call tonight when you add everyone up, and it might take a really long time. But pretty much everyone would say that Phil and Avril together, as Deb said, where one finishes and the other one starts, is we can't really see. They were a unit together, but they have just been such a stability within the whole life of the Lighthouse, from beginning to right up till now. The thing that I've really loved about Phil is that his incredible supernatural faith, he had faith for miracles, he had faith for provision, he had faith to see the most incredible things happen, and yet he was the most practical of people as well. And he'd be the one that would be reading everything in detail and sending back the spelling mistakes, and you've missed this and you haven't got that and you haven't done this, and he kept us on the straight and narrow, but not in a way that just slowed everything down, because he always had faith for the future as well. And he really had great vision and great hope that the promises that were spoken over his life would come to pass. And I think many of them have in different ways, and others will continue to be fulfilled in his legacy. You know, all the stories we've heard tonight are just incredible of how he's affected so many people in this journey. You know, the Lighthouse isn't a big church, but there's probably been quite a lot of people that have been through it and been influenced it, and probably Phil was there having an influence in all of those people right the way along. As Heather was saying, we've known the Game family probably since 1986, when we first moved from Poole to from Brighton to Poole, and it was literally when Bryony was just born. So we're probably talking 30 something years ago now, and we knew the whole family. We Andy was in our youth group, and Steve, yeah, and kind of like we had involvement with the whole group, and they had an impact on us right from those days. They used to run the most extraordinary house group that you had to stand in the corridor to get involved with, because it was so popular, because people liked to be with them. They felt safe. And, you know, if there's one thing I would say about Phil, you know, I said, like, he's a pillar of the church. Heather said he's a pillar of the church. And, you know, we're not exaggerating on that. And as Adrian so brilliantly put it about the pillar kind of holding up the roof and creating space, and, you know, not necessarily doing the big dramatic things. He kept everything really, really stable within the whole of that time. So why do I call him a pillar of the church? And there's certain aspects to who he was and what he did that that just amaze me, and have just made me feel, whenever he was around, I've always felt really safe. You know, yeah. It's like he inspired me to kind of look forward, but then he made me feel safe in the process. And he was just an amazing guy to have on the team. And one of the reasons for that was he really believed in church. You know, it was like right at the core of who he was. There had, you know, if Phil and Avril were not at church, you probably knew something was really wrong. They really prioritized the gathering of the saints, the bringing of people together, the looking after people. There's an incredible faithfulness in it, you know, and he, because he believed in it, he fostered that in other people as well. I think it's kind of, I've heard it said, you lead people into what you are, not what you say. And it was, if you know, if you like a stick of rock, if you looked in the middle of Phil, it would just sort of say church and kingdom and family. Those were very high values to him. He really, really believed in it. And, you know, he is going to leave a huge hole in the Lighthouse, really. Phil has just been involved with so much stuff, as we've heard. They've kind of influenced the whole mission side of the Lighthouse. They've organized trips to Malawi and Uganda, and they've been over to Bangladesh and over into Asia lots of times. And as Nathan said, you know, even two of our own kids went on that trip over to Ethiopia. I mean, just the idea of taking a bunch of 14-year-olds over to Ethiopia to kind of eat goat curry and build houses, it's like fills me with horror. But they just took it completely in their stride. And he's been a trustee. He's been on the original core team, for which when the church first started off, there was 3 couples, and if you were a guy, you had to be called Phil to be on the team, because we had Phil Game and Phil Reed and Phil Dowding. And but, you know, right from the beginning, he's been at the core of everything that's going on. So he's been a trustee, a core team, he's been an employee, he's run home groups and marriage courses. And, you know, one of the big things that I pick up was, if you ever said to Phil, would you pray about this for me? I'm struggling with this, or we need this to happen. you knew he was going to pray. You knew he would take that. It's like Heather said, his yes was yes and his no was no. Sometimes he did kind of launch a few no's. He was not frightened to actually say what he thought, and would actually sometimes give you a little bit of his mind. But usually when he got behind something, he was completely behind it. We had a friend once who came to the church many years ago, and she used to teach on intergenerational worship and how to bring the generations together. And she said, one of the things that this generation has a responsibility to do is to teach the following generations how to live in a godly way and how to die in a godly way. And I honestly feel like Phil has just really left an incredible legacy in the generations that have come through. As Heather said, it'll be our 25th anniversary this year, because 1996 we started. And through those 25 years, we've had different generations that have passed through, and he has really impacted every single one of them. Yeah, and even in his passing, and I think it's really important. The reason why we've done this Zoom call is because, you know, sometimes life and death and these are a bit taboo, and people are frightened to talk about them and display emotion and all of this sort of stuff. But I think it's part of life, isn't it? It's like, it's the one thing that is coming to us all sooner or later. We need to come together as family in these times and process these things and grieve together and celebrate together and all of those sort of things. And so it's been really, really good to do that. In his, I mean, I hope everyone won't mind me saying this, but in his passing, even that was done in an incredible, peaceful and godly way. You know, he kind of woke up on Friday morning, I think it was, and just said to everyone, "Oh, I feel a bit tired," you know, and went back to bed. And
I heard after making her a cup of tea.
After making her a cup of tea first, and
key example.
kind of, yeah, popped back to bed, and Avril popped up later, and he said, "I still feel a bit tired," and she was able to say, "I love you," and, you know, just kind of be at peace. And next time she went up, there he was, and he'd gone, and just very peacefully in his sleep, it was his time. And, you know, that morning, I think it was Friday morning, I woke up, and before any of this had heard anything had happened, I kind of woke up and I just said to the Lord, "Lord, where do you want me to go in the scriptures today?" It's what I've been doing recently, just to get him to lead me to a particular place. And that morning he led me to Ecclesiastes 3, which is not a destination of choice for me, Ecclesiastes, but on this occasion I went to have a look at it. And the opening verse of that is, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die." And of course it goes on and on, doesn't it, about how the seasons of life kind of play out. And I was talking to Avril today, and, you know, we were both sort of have a peace that actually it was the time, it was the right time. It's really sad, and you can't get over that. He's left a huge hole in everything, but it was his time. And I think Avril has got a real sense of the purposes of God in her life, and she knows where Phil's gone, and, you know, he will be doing what he does. I am sure he's already kind of stepped into the administrator's role up there. He's probably organizing people and getting everything in order and all of that stuff. But you know, it carries on. That's the thing. This life that we're in is just such a fragment of eternity. It is the tiniest bit, and I think Avril has grasped that that the kingdom is so much bigger than this little bit of life. And so there's a separation for a bit, but we're going to be back together and we're going to be celebrating. There's a big party that's going to happen. I wanted to just finish by inviting Albert, because Albert phoned me up the other day and said, "Oh, I've had a little bit of an encounter, a vision that I feel like God has been saying, speaking to me through, and I needed a bit of wisdom to know how to share it. But having talked to Avril, at first I thought maybe kind of a little bit soon to say something and all of that sort of stuff. But having talked to her today and talked to the people around her, I think it would be appropriate for Albert to just sort of share this picture that he had. Albert, are you there still? Unmute yourself if you are.
Yeah.
Yay, there you are. Good. Albert, would you mind sharing that picture that you shared with me, both parts of it, the kind of the beginning part and the end part, because it really kind of gives some hope as well for the days coming ahead.
Okay. And first, I woke up Saturday morning because Friday evening, Sheila kind of shared something with us because not knowing that, because I've already decided I was going to phone Phil to ask a favor of him on Saturday morning. So when Sheila shared with us that he's passed, it just kind of feels like, okay, I can't call him then because he's gone. There's no way of asking that favor anymore. So I woke up Saturday morning and sat down on the sofa. And as soon as I sat down, I heard an announcement. And the announcement was, Fill the Game, Homecoming. And I thought, fill the game, homecoming. It just doesn't make sense. The phrase doesn't sound right. So I'm just going to leave it for now and just sit there and see if anything else comes. So I was just sat there and I was about to have communion as soon as I just picked up the bread. And then the phrase came back again. But before I heard the announcement again, I saw the face. I saw his face, Phil Game's face, a younger version of him. And then I heard the announcement again, fill the game. But this time, because I've seen the face, I was able to put the name to the face because I realized, oh, okay, it was Phil Game, homecoming. And the person was coming out of this dugout into this, it looked like a stadium, like an arena, and it's packed full of people. And as he was coming out, it's just like he poked his head out and saw the place and he looked around and he just ran back in again. He went back into the dugout, like he's just having a laugh. And then he came out and he just had this smile on his face. And it's just like, it was just standing there looking around. Like it wasn't, but it's just weird. Like it was just I don't know how to explain this, but he was just overjoyed, so to speak. He was just excited. You know, it wasn't shocked, but he was excited. And the crowd, and it's just like the whole place was just filled with noise, welcoming him home. And then that passed. And as soon as that passed, all I saw Avril just sat in this, she was dressed in this sari, like this Asian clothing, and sitting down with women, lots of women. It's like a vast space, just women all over, just surrounding her. And she was just sitting in the middle, like a mother, just serving. And she just got this thing with her and just pick up a plate and put something on the plate and pass it on. And it just kept going, and just women everywhere. And then all of a sudden I heard a voice, and the voice was, she is going to break new grounds. She's going to break new grounds. But then the next thing was God said, keep her close. You know, he said, keep her close, like keep her like a mother, be like a mother to her. Not let her not lack anything or want anything, but just be a mother to her and keep her close and be a family to her. And so yesterday I phoned Phil and I said, look, this is what God shared with me. And I don't know where to go with it. As much as I wanted to tell Avril, I just felt that morning, the timing issue, I just didn't know what to do with it. So I just spoke to her.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Albert. You know, and I think Albert's really been moving out in the prophetic and kind of going deeper and deeper with each kind of day, that month, that's week, or whatever that's gone on. And we've really come to trust the things that he's hearing and sensing. And I was filled with a sense of well-being, you know, that, yeah, Phil was coming home. And there was a celebration, and there was that playful, joyful side of him as he was coming out of the dugout into the arena, and everyone was cheering and clapping, and that, you know, that sense of peace. And yeah, it was his time, and he's come into an amazing place. But also that there's a new dawn arising, and Avril knows this. She spoke to me and told me about it today. She's got this sense as well that, you know, this is not the end, but another beginning in a way. And you know, Avril, if you're listening, I just want to assure you that we've got your back. We are going to watch over you. We're going to look after you, anything you need, and the family as well that's listening. Steve and Boo and Andy, if you're listening to the recording, and all the grandchildren, and John as well. You know, you do an amazing job and all that, but we're here, we're on the ground as well, okay, and we're going to look after Avril, and we're going to see that she comes through all of this and steps into this new destiny, whatever God has got for her. So I think we'll kind of leave that bit there. Heather, do you want to say anything else?
Sure. What we would love to do is if Phil can work the technology, break us into some very small groups to spend 5 or 10 minutes praying for the Game family, praying for one another, and just really allowing that all the good example that Phil has led us in sink in, and, you know, pray it into our church. So